Welcome back to. What if I told you that a coin most people would completely ignore could actually be one of the most interesting pennies in your collection? Imagine finding a small, worn-looking Lincoln penny dated 1967, checking your pocket change, an old jar, or a forgotten coin box, and suddenly realizing that this tiny piece of copper has a story connected to one of the most unusual periods in United States coinage. Welcome back to Hardest Penny, the channel where we look beyond the face value of ordinary coins and uncover the history, secrets, varieties, and potential value hiding in plain sight. Today, we are taking a close look at one coin only, the 1967 Lincoln penny. And before you spend this coin for just 1 cent, stay with me, because there are several things you should know about this fascinating issue. 1967 Lincoln penny. The 1967 Lincoln penny may look ordinary at first glance, but its history makes it much more interesting than many people realize. This coin was produced during a period when the United States Mint was dealing with a serious coin shortage. Americans were using enormous quantities of coins, and collectors and speculators were also putting pressure on the supply. Because of this situation, the United States made some unusual decisions regarding its circulating coinage. One of the most interesting details about the 1967 Lincoln cent is the absence of a mint mark. If you look underneath the date, you will not see a small D or S. That does not automatically mean the coin is rare or that something is wrong with it. In fact, the United States Mint intentionally removed mint marks from circulating coins during the years 1965 through 1967. The goal was partly to discourage people from collecting coins based on their mint of origin and hoarding them during the coin shortage. That means a 1967 Lincoln cent with no mint mark is completely normal. And this is where many new collectors make a mistake. They see an old penny without a mint mark and immediately assume it must be a rare Philadelphia coin. But the 1967 issue is different. During this period, coins were produced at multiple United States mint facilities, yet the lack of mint marks makes them impossible to identify by mint simply by looking at the coin. The 1967 cent was made from the traditional bronze composition used for Lincoln cents of that era. It contains approximately 95% copper, with the remaining metal consisting primarily of zinc and tin. The coin weighs about 3.11 grams and has a diameter of approximately 19 millimeters. Its edge is plain. On the front of the coin, you see the famous portrait of President Abraham Lincoln. Above him are the words "In God We Trust," while "Liberty" appears beside his portrait, and the date 1967 is positioned below. The design comes from Victor David Brenner's famous Lincoln cent design, which had already been part of American coinage for decades. Turn the coin over, and you will see the Lincoln Memorial. So, is the 1967 Lincoln penny rare? The simple answer is no. The normal 1967 Lincoln cent is not considered a rare coin. Millions upon millions were produced, and large numbers have survived. Because of that, an ordinary circulated example generally does not command a huge premium simply because it is more than half a century old. But this is where coin collecting becomes exciting. A coin does not have to be rare in every condition to become interesting. Condition, color, strike quality, errors, varieties, and collector demand can all influence what someone is willing to pay. When you examine a 1967 Lincoln cent, one of the first things you should look at is its condition. Has the coin spent decades circulating through stores, vending machines, pockets, and cash registers? Or does it look almost untouched? A heavily circulated 1967 penny may have scratches, discoloration, flattened details, and a darker brown appearance. Such a coin is generally worth very little above its face value unless it possesses an unusual error or variety. But a sharply struck, uncirculated example with attractive original color can be much more interesting to collectors. Lincoln cents are often described by color categories such as brown, red-brown, and red. A bright original red copper appearance can make a major difference when comparing high-grade examples. This is one of the biggest lessons for anyone searching old pennies. Never judge a coin only by its date. You should also inspect the coin carefully under good lighting and, if possible, with magnification. Look closely at the date. Check the lettering. Examine Lincoln's portrait. Then turn the coin over and inspect the lettering around the Lincoln Memorial. You are looking for anything that appears unusual, but be careful. Not every strange-looking mark is a valuable mint error. Coins can develop scratches, dents, machine doubling, dye deterioration, environmental damage, corrosion, and other abnormalities after leaving the mint. These problems can sometimes look dramatic, but may add little or no collectible value. True mint errors and recognized die varieties are a different story. The 1967 Lincoln cent is known to collectors for various die varieties and double die possibilities, which means a serious collector should not automatically dismiss a strange-looking 1967 penny. However, identifying a genuine double die requires careful examination and comparison with known varieties. A random scratch or flattened letter should not be called a double die. This is especially important because the internet is filled with exaggerated claims about ordinary pennies supposedly being worth thousands or even millions of dollars. Sometimes a headline makes a common coin sound like a treasure simply because it has an interesting date. The truth is that value depends heavily on the exact coin, its condition, its variety, and whether the feature has been authenticated. So, what should you do if you think your 1967 Lincoln penny has something unusual? First, do not clean it. This is extremely important. Many people think an old coin will become more valuable if they polish it until it shines. Unfortunately, cleaning can damage the original surface, and instead, place the coin somewhere safe and examine it carefully. If the coin appears to have an unusual doubling, an unusual strike, or an exceptionally high-quality appearance, compare it with reliable coin references or consider professional authentication. The difference between an ordinary coin and a collectible variety can sometimes be very small, and professional grading can become especially important for valuable high-grade examples. There is also something historically fascinating about the 1967 Lincoln cent. This was America in the late 1960s, a period of tremendous social, political, and economic change. The coin that may be sitting in your hand today was originally struck during that era and could have traveled through countless transactions before ending up in a collection. Think about that for a moment. A 1-cent coin could have been used to buy something at a store in 1967. It could have been carried by a student, placed inside a cash register, dropped on a sidewalk, saved in a jar, and eventually forgotten for decades. Every scratch and mark may represent part of its journey. That is what makes coin collecting so fascinating. You are not simply collecting metal. You are collecting history. And the 1967 Lincoln penny is a perfect example of why you should always look twice before dismissing an old coin as worthless. Now, if you have a 1967 Lincoln cent, check 3 things immediately: the overall condition, the color and originality of the surfaces, and any unusual details that could indicate a variety or mint error. Remember that the absence of a mint mark on a 1967 penny is normal. Do not assume that no mint mark means the coin is automatically rare. And don't believe every online price claim. A coin being advertised for thousands of dollars does not mean that every example of the same date is worth thousands. Actual value depends on the specific specimen and the market. So, could your 1967 Lincoln penny be worth more than 1 cent? Possibly, especially if you have an unusually high-grade example, a legitimate recognized variety, or an authentic mint error. But an ordinary circulated 1967 penny will usually remain a common collectible coin rather than a jackpot. Still, never underestimate the smallest coins. The next time you see a 1967 Lincoln penny, don't throw it aside without looking. Pick it up, turn it over, check the date, study the lettering, examine the surfaces, because sometimes the most interesting discoveries begin with a coin that everyone else thought was just 1 cent. And that is exactly why here at Hardest Penny, we don't just look at coins, we investigate them. If you enjoyed this deep look at the 1967 Lincoln penny, make sure you stay connected with Hardest Penny, because there are countless old coins still sitting in collections, jars, drawers, and pockets, waiting for someone to notice the details that everyone else missed. Your next penny could be ordinary. What if one small penny sitting in an old coin jar could be hiding a story that most people completely overlook? What if the coin you have seen hundreds of times, the coin that looks like nothing more than 1 cent, actually deserves a much closer inspection? Today on Hardest Penny, we're going back to 1987 to examine a Lincoln cent that millions of people have probably handled without ever realizing what they were holding. And if you have a 1987 Lincoln penny, do not throw it into your spare change pile just yet. There are important details you need to know about its history, condition, mint mark, possible errors, and collectible value. The biggest question is simple. Is your 1987 penny just an ordinary 1 cent coin, or could you have an example that collectors would actually want? 1987 de Lincoln Penny. The 1987 Lincoln penny was struck at the Denver Mint, and the small letter D beneath the date tells us where this coin was produced. Unlike some Lincoln cents from earlier periods, the 1987 cent is not considered rare simply because it is old. In fact, the United States Mint produced this coin in very large numbers, which means ordinary circulated examples are generally common. But common does not mean uninteresting. That is one of the most important lessons for new coin collectors. A coin can have a large mintage and still become interesting when you find an exceptional example, a genuine mint error, or a coin preserved in unusually high condition. The 1987 Lincoln cent is part of the long-running Lincoln cent series that began in 1909. By 1987, the familiar Lincoln Memorial design had already been on the reverse for almost 3 decades. The front features Victor David Brenner's famous portrait of Abraham Lincoln, with "In God We Trust" above his head, "Liberty" to the left, and the date 1987 to the right. Under the date is the letter D. That small letter is extremely important because it identifies the Denver Mint. Turn the coin over, and you will see the Lincoln Memorial surrounded by the familiar inscriptions United States of America, E Pluribus Unum, and 1 cent. If you look closely at the memorial, you may even notice tiny details that can become difficult to see on heavily circulated coins. If you find a 1987 penny with a strange color, damaged surface, or exposed-looking metal, do not automatically assume you have discovered a rare mint error. Zinc cents can experience various forms of damage and corrosion, especially when the copper plating becomes compromised. A coin that looks silver, dark, spotted, or unusually colored may simply have environmental damage, chemical exposure, or plating damage. This is why careful examination matters. Now let's talk about the most important factor for an ordinary 1987 penny: condition. A heavily circulated coin will usually show wear on Lincoln's hair, cheek, jaw, and other raised areas. The lettering may also become softer, and the Lincoln Memorial on the reverse may lose some of its fine details. Scratches, dents. Imagine finding a 1987 penny that appears almost brand new. The surfaces are bright, the details are sharp, and there are very few marks. This kind of coin can attract much more attention from collectors, particularly when it reaches a very high certified grade. And there is another detail that collectors often watch closely with Lincoln cents: color. Copper-colored coins can generally be described as brown, red-brown, or red, depending on how much of their original reddish coloration remains. For a copper-plated zinc cent like the 1987 the situation is somewhat different because of its composition, but surface preservation and original appearance are still important when determining quality. A beautiful, sharply struck, nearly flawless 1987 cent can be far more interesting than a worn example that has spent decades circulating. But what about errors? This is where things get exciting. Whenever collectors examine large quantities of modern cents, they search for unusual mint-made characteristics. These can include double dies, off-center strikes, clip planchets, broad strikes, die cracks, missing or unusual design elements, and other genuine mint errors. However, there is a huge difference between a real mint error and damage that happened after the coin left the mint. For example, if the edge of your 1987 penny looks unusual because it was hit by another object, that does not necessarily make it valuable. If the surface has scratches that resemble doubling, that is not automatically a double die. If the copper-colored surface has been removed and the coin looks silver underneath, that does not automatically mean it was struck on a rare planchet. Coin collecting requires patience. Before believing a dramatic value claim, examine the coin carefully and compare it with reliable references. If something appears genuinely unusual, professional authentication can be a smart step. Another common mistake is assuming that a high price listed online proves that the coin is worth that amount. It doesn't. An advertised price is simply an asking price. The real collectible value of a coin depends on factors such as condition, rarity, demand, authenticity, and actual sales. So if someone tells you that every 1987 D Lincoln penny is worth hundreds or thousands of dollars, be extremely cautious. The ordinary 1987 D cent is a common coin, but an exceptional example can still be worth keeping. And this is exactly why you should inspect your coin before spending it. Look at the date. Look at the D. Look at Lincoln's portrait. Look at the lettering. Then flip it over and carefully inspect the memorial and the surrounding inscriptions. Use a magnifying glass if necessary, but do not clean the coin. Cleaning is one of the worst things a collector can do to an old coin. Scrubbing, polishing, or using chemicals can permanently damage the original surface. A coin that looks dirty but retains its original surfaces can be much more desirable than a shiny coin that has been harshly cleaned. There is also something special about holding a coin from 1987. Think about the world when this penny was made. The technology, music, cars, television, fashion, and everyday life were completely different from today. This tiny piece of metal was created during that period and entered circulation at a time when people were buying groceries, paying for small items, using pay phones, riding buses, and carrying coins in their pockets. Over the years, the coin may have traveled thousands of miles. It may have passed through countless hands, and now it could be sitting in your collection. That is the magic of coin collecting. A penny does not have to be extremely rare to be fascinating. The 1987 D Lincoln penny is a perfect example. Its normal version is common, but its condition, possible varieties, and so, if you have a 1987 D penny, what should you do? First, don't panic and don't assume you have a fortune. Second, don't clean it. Third, inspect it under good lighting. Fourth, look for genuine abnormalities rather than random damage. And finally, if you believe your coin has an important variety or error, consider having it examined by an experienced numismatist or professional grading service. The real treasure may not be the date alone. It may be the condition. It may be an unusual mint error. It may be a variety. Or it may simply be the history behind the coin. And that is what makes searching Lincoln pennies so addictive. You can look through hundreds of ordinary coins and find nothing unusual. And then suddenly one small detail catches your eye. A strange shape, an unusual strike, an unexpected mark, a remarkably clean surface. And suddenly, you are no longer looking at 1 cent. You are looking at a piece of American history. So before you spend that old 1987 D Lincoln penny, take a second look. It may be completely ordinary, and that's okay. But if it has an unusual characteristic or exceptional condition, it could deserve a place in your collection. Here at Hardest Penny, we believe every coin deserves a closer look before it gets ignored. Because sometimes the smallest coins can tell the biggest stories. Keep checking your change, keep learning the details, and never underestimate a penny. Your next discovery could be hiding in plain sight. If you want, I can also make the next Lincoln penny script in the same Hardest Penny style, with an even more suspenseful opening and stronger viewer retention lines.